Good morning. I know that we're expecting a few other people, but we'd like to go ahead and get started. My name's Dawn Oberlander. I'm the Majority Policy Chairman, and it's my pleasure to be here in Representative Hershey's district. And I'm going to turn it over to Representative Hershey for the welcome.
Great. I wanted to thank you guys all for coming out. So I wanted to let you guys know how excited I am for this opportunity, just because it's not every day that we can bring House leaders to our individual districts to promote things that we're doing in the House and to listen to your concerns. So Representative Oberlander, by way of introduction, is our policy committee chairwoman. And so she sets a lot of the policy ideas and the agenda that we consider in the full House of Representatives. And then Representative Benninghoff, when he gets here, is our whip. So he's in charge of enforcing a lot of that agenda. And then a lot of the other representatives that are here in the room are on the forefront of developing some of our policy objectives in the House and really advancing what we want to see for our communities. And since we have the majority right now, a lot of the things that we try to push actually ends up getting done with the governor's approval, which is always a good thing. So for my colleagues that are here in the room, it's by chance that I ended up right across the street from my family's dealership. We moved in here, I was told, about 5 years ago. I helped get this building ready when I was in college. This used to be a modular home manufacturer. And I actually just inherited Representative Harris's office across the street. But by way of explaining my district, I actually have out to Mifflin County. I like to say when you drive from Harrisburg to Harrisburg to State College, you're in my district for about half of that time, in Representative Keller's district for about a quarter of that time, and in Representative Benninghoff's district for the other quarter. And then it's actually a very rural district. So my district stretches from here all the way down to Franklin County, and I have Chambersburg addresses from here. So it's pretty spread out, pretty rural. Agriculture and agribusiness is probably the #1 industry in this area, but we also have a lot of manufacturing as well. So Mifflin County, we make steel rail wheels for a lot of the major rail lines in the United States, and everything from diapers to plastic bags. So I've been following a lot of those issues as well. And then here in Juniata County, of course, we'll hear from Bruce a little bit later. And you see any metal receptacles or benches in the Capitol or all along the East Coast, those are also manufactured right across the street behind my office. So we have a lot of manufacturing interests as well. And I like to say when I was running for office that being positioned between State College and Harrisburg, we have some pretty incredible infrastructure opportunities here and some pretty incredible employment opportunities that we'll hear about in a little bit. So I wanted to thank the Majority Policy Committee for coming and thank my colleagues that are here today.
Excellent. Before we get started, let's go ahead and do some introductions. If we could start over here, Bruce.
Bruce Lyle, I'm the CEO of Energex, which is the wood pellet plant over by Vinny's, the OIT at Port Royal.
George has.
Mike Buffington, president of One Stop Communications. We cover about a 6-county radius from Mifflin County. So,
I'm Torrin Ecker. I'm a state representative from Adams and Cumberland County. I'm also a freshman, and Chairwoman Oberlander's been traveling around the state, and I'm happy to come support one of my fellow freshmen.
I'm David Rowe. I represent the 85th Legislative District. I just recently replaced Fred Keller, who has now moved on to the congressional level. So very happy to be here. Thank you, John.
Morning, everybody. Matt Gobler, 75th District, Elk and Clearfield counties. I'm one of the old guys here with all these young guys. So glad to be joining everybody. Thank you.
Hi, Barb Gleim from Cumberland County. I'm a freshman also, took over for Representative Steve Bloom in that area, and I'm happy to be here with my fellow freshmen. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Mark Partner, one of the Juniata County Commissioners. Pleased to be here, and thank you, John and Chairman, for coming to Juniata County.
Todd Graybill, another one of the Juniata County Commissioners, and again, thank you for coming and participating in this area.
Gray, the 3rd Juniata County.
which is also where we're sitting right now.
Well, thank you all for, number one, being here this morning. Thank you for introducing yourselves. It's a great mixture of both government, private sector, and then the legislature. So I'm really pleased to have such a great turnout. As you've heard, we've been traveling the state. I actually became the policy chair in January, December, and we've been traveling the state doing business roundtables, going into businesses, getting the tours and learning more from them about what we can do better. And that was part of our initiative, Good Jobs for PA. And what we had heard repeatedly is that we have a lot of good jobs in Pennsylvania, but we are not necessarily filling them with the qualified candidates. And so some of what we've been working on are ways to match individuals who might be interested in a position with the skills to get that position, how we can work with businesses to improve the climate for them, and a number of other issues. So we've been everywhere from Clint Outlets District near the New York border to Cumberland, Adams. We were in Barb's district, we were in Torrance district. We've been all over, and we have been amazed at the information that we've received. So we really want this to be an interactive opportunity. We want you to be able to share your thoughts and concerns, and it really is a chance for us to hear what you have to say, and then hopefully we can either react, we can share some information that's already occurring, and we have, through this process, had some opportunities for legislation. Correct, Representative Torin? Eckert? I like to just call you Representative Torin. So with that, you want to kick it off with a certain, does somebody want to start with an issue or concern that they have? And I have one quick question. What is Juniata County Prevention Board?
So if you're familiar with communities that care, sure. If you're familiar with Communities That Care, it's a nationwide youth prevention effort. That's what we are. We're a chapter of Communities That Care, basically deal with youth issues. One of the reasons that I wanted to join today is often we talk about concerns with keeping youth in the county after graduation, the opportunities that are available to them, how we can connect them better to our community so that they're successful community members and that they don't flee the county to other opportunities.
Terrific. Thank you very much. All right. Herman.
Something that's going to be hot for all of us is that on November 6th is the election. On the ballot is a constitutional amendment. It's been heavily advertised in the newspapers. I've read it. I still don't understand it. I asked the Center County judge last week if he could explain it. He couldn't explain it well. I just want to know if, what is the crime? It has something to do with crime victims, but I thought maybe you could give us an insight on what this is all about and the controversy between it being on the ballot and in simple language wording that's now being disputed in the courts as whether it's actually going to be on the ballot or not.
I'll do my best. So what you're talking about is Marsys, excuse me, Marsys Law. It is a ballot question, which means that it was it went through the legislative process, identical in 2 sessions, and what it would permit is a change to the Constitution to provide victims with a constitutional right. The push from those who support it is that those who are accused have rights, but those who have been victimized do not have rights. And some of what you may see in the advertising from those who support it are things like family members aren't made aware when there's bail has been made and released, and then they see them at the grocery store, and their loved one's been killed, and now they're face to face with that individual. And it is being challenged right now in the courts based on the language and whether or not it changes more than one thing and if that's proper. So I can't really speak to that part of it. The pushback is that it may assume guilt before actually going through the legal process. I hope that was as clear and plain as possible, because I'm a clear and plain sort of a person. Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Representative.
And really, this is about notice. It's about giving victims notice of things in proceedings. That's really the basic fundamentals of Marsys Law, and what this constitutional amendment will do is allow victims to get notice of things like parole hearings, probation hearings, whether someone got a bail hearing. It's the namesake of Marsys Law was a situation where a lady was raped and murdered in California, and the accused was released on bail, I believe, and the family didn't know about it. And as Representative Oberlander pointed out, they turned the corner at the supermarket and they're faced with this gentleman. So, and the family had no idea that he was released for bail. So that's kind of that's the impetus behind this. We have the Victims' Rights Act currently, but it's not a constitutional amendment. So with that, there's no constitutional rights that are embodied by that. So really, that's what this does. And I don't think it got a single negative vote within our body. So
it did not.
Yeah.
Thank you, Representatives. Go ahead.
So just since we're on a limited time crunch here and we have a tour to go on, I wanted to hear from people like Mike, Rhonda, Bruce, some of the workforce issues that we deal with, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to share some of the things we've been working on in the House as well, and commissioners, any of you guys. And yeah, go ahead.
I run the second largest wood pellet company in North America for domestic heating. I have 2 plants, one here in Mifflintown and another one in Quebec. And infrastructure is probably one of the biggest issues for me. And doing business in Canada versus doing business here in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania ties your arms behind your back. And I'll give you a case in point. Here, we take probably at that plant somewhere around 17,000 truckloads of material in and out a year. And we're always limited to generally an 80,000 pound truck limit, which allows us on shipping final goods about 22 tons. Sometimes you can get to 90. And I had some business over in Italy, and we were actually filling containers and shipping them over to the port of New York, and we had to put it in heavy to get it make economic. Our fuel in relation is very heavy, so it's not worth a heck of a lot versus television sets or something. So weight is a big issue to us. And considering Pennsylvania is a forestry sector, Pennsylvania's forestry is big in our industry. And around the northern New England area, truck limits up there in the forestry sector are several tons higher. So I can ship out of our Quebec plant into Maine and New Hampshire, 28-ton loads, up to even 30-ton loads, because of the forestry sector. This is what they do. But here, I get DOT parked on our ramp, about once a month, weighing trucks. And in particular, I had this business over in Italy that I was starting here, but because the weight limit became such a factor, it was easier for me to transfer that business up to our Quebec plant, or I can ship a 36-ton truck to the Port of Montreal without having to have any hassles on freight. We spend an exorbitant amount of money on our infrastructure and our roads. I mean, we got $1.5 million Brooklyn Bridge going on right now at the Arch Rock Road exit, which should have been probably a $250,000 job. So I get into that. I also happen to own the Mifflintown Airport. And about 10 years ago, we did a $250,000 paving job for $400,000 because the state was participated in the thing. So I guess my point is that we should look at some of these basic, for us in the forestry sector, we should look at, you know, increasing our road limits, you know, because we've got good highways. We do maintain them, and allowing us to, you know, to be able to be economic. Like there's a drift for an inland port in Harrisburg, and that would be a great thing because then we could just ship it to Harrisburg. You know, I've shipped all the way to California from Harrisburg on intermodal, but again, it comes down to weighted trucks, and we're too parochial with our roads. That's my point.
Thank you, sir. Representative Gobler.
Mr. Lyle, thank you very much for that feedback. I represent a district that's also very heavily in the timber sector. In fact, one of the comments I was going to make in introducing myself was saying that as I was driving in here, I looked around and I saw that this district looks very familiar to me, except you've got more farms and I've got more forests, I think. But other than that, we've got a lot of similar issues. But I got to tell you, the weight limit issue with PennDOT has been something that we've been fighting for some time, and unfortunately it's been through multiple administrations of both parties. If you want to go back a few years, under the previous governor's administration, when there was discussion about trying to build support for an increase in the gas tax, it was amazing how many additional restrictions we saw that were put on bridges, and to the point where a lot of our small towns were getting choked by weight limits on bridges. And we had to fight very hard, unfortunately playing defense on this issue, just to get those bridges unposted back to the weight limits that we would call normal, that you correctly identify that are still way too low. Another data point that I think it's interesting to consider is that we're still fighting some infrastructure problems based on how we structure our programs within the state. I'm on a task force within our caucus. I also serve as the subcommittee chair on our House Appropriations Committee dealing with economics and infrastructure. So your feedback is very, very helpful to me. One of the things that we are looking at is the fact that we've actually got a $1.2 billion per year problem that is facing us right in the face, and that's from two sources. One, out of our motor license fund, we divert over $700 million, almost $800 million a year to pay for our state police. And our state police is something that should be a general fund obligation. So that is something that takes money away from investments into our infrastructure. And so really what we need to do is we need to work on structuring our state budgets. And we've made some incremental progress in the last few budgets in putting more of the state police into the general fund. But we actually need to take a bigger bite of that, and instead of doing slow and steady, I think we need to do some very big changes year over year in the next few years, and that's something that I'm certainly advocating for within the Appropriations Committee. The other problem that we have is there was a piece of legislation that was passed in 2007 called Act 44, and that bill, among other things, called for the tolling of I-80, which I found to be very I'm from Du Bois, so I found that to be a very big problem, and it was something that I was very thankful didn't go into effect. But there was another part of Act 44 which called for the Turnpike Commission to take on debt and provide $450 million a year to PennDOT to spend on other projects unrelated to the Turnpike all over the state. That provision is going to sunset in 2022, and for good reason, because the Turnpike Commission is crushed with $10–12 billion worth of debt. They'll probably never see the light of day again. The Turnpike Commission has some real problems. But when you add those two things together, the diversion of the state police monies with the coming problem with the Turnpike Commission, the $400 million is going to drop off. We're looking at $1.2 billion. So I think that your feedback is very timely, because one of the things that we need to be working on is taking the existing tax revenue we're receiving and making sure that it's going to the infrastructure in the way that we need it to. And by putting that focus on it, I think we also need to include in that conversation the fact that our employers, our manufacturers need to get their products to market, and we need to do it in a competitive manner. And your feedback about the New England states is very timely. So I think that's something we can take back, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'll just follow this up, because you opened up a beef for me. I've been here in Juniata County about 20 years, and obviously I'm not from here, and I've lived in other states. And I want to just tell you, you guys got too much goddamn government, excuse my language. I mean, there is so many layers of this, and you're talking about funding, which, you know, I'm the simple guy trying to, you know, you're pulling driver license money over here for that, you know, and it just, I have found doing business here, you know, I own the airport. I won't hire anybody at the airport because then that opens me up to a huge realm of bureaucracy to have a payroll. And it's a small business, you know, where my airport is kind of I'm more of a community trustee of this asset. You know, I'm not going to ever hire anybody there. I won't, because I did start as another small business on the side at one point in time, and then I was bombasted by the Pennsylvania bureaucracy. And I said, the hell with it. And so again, that's something that, you know, if there's a major restructuring that I think that this state needs to do. I mean, and you know, take a look at it, because I think you've got a lot of government here. You've got a lot of entities from the top on the way down. And if you're playing accounting games, paying this fund to this one, it's all general fund, you know, make it simple. That's my political speech, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments. I think that most of us agree that smaller government is a better government. Yes, Mr. Buffington, please go ahead.
One of the issues that I felt would be beneficial in this discussion is the regulatory demands on small businesses have really gone out of control. And we all pay for it as consumers, taxpayers, and it slows down growth of many small businesses because they can't meet the demands that are put on them or don't even know what they are. Turn around and look at the board behind you. There's some of the regulatory demands that come up. And for a small business owner to understand and know everything that's out there on the books that they have to comply with, and the hurdles they run into as they're starting and trying to get going is just incredible anymore. In fact, I started my business 23 years ago. I wouldn't want to be doing it today. I would not want to be starting out today with the burdens that are put on us and every hurdle you have to jump through.
Sir, would you mind reminding us, what does One Stop Cricket do?
So let me take a step back. I do a couple different things. I'm in the banking industry. I'm in property management, and we also run retail wireless stores throughout central Pennsylvania.
Well, you said banking.
Yes.
And we know that it's highly, highly regulated.
That one is, and it costs everybody money in the end, and makes certain products not available to everybody out on the market.
Yes, Representative Gobler.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that feedback, and I wanted to provide a little bit of information, because the regulatory side of things is something that I'm very sensitive to, and it's something that I think I would start by saying that nobody here on this committee got involved in government because they thought it was too small or too efficient, right? So I think all of us are here looking to figure out how we can restack that deck and how we can change that that equation so that it leans more in the favor of the people that are creating the jobs and actually creating the economic activity. I think that one of my favorite things that we've done this session is as the majority caucus in the House, we've implemented, and it might sound a little kitschy, but it's actually been very effective. It's called theme weeks. And we've had, instead of doing the shotgun approach where you don't know what sort of bills are up on a given week, we try to talk about things in a given theme. And one of the theme weeks that I thought was one of the best things we did this past spring was the theme week on getting rid of outdated and overbearing government, regulatory reform. And so that took a number of forms. One was repealing old outdated laws that were just confusing, and we had dozens and dozens of repealer bills. I had one myself that dealt with a law going back to 1836 that doesn't even really make any sense anymore. But also included with that was a regulatory reform package. Representative Benninghoff, who I know is local right here and a good friend of mine, actually is the kind of the lead on that, but it's actually looking at taking a page out of some laws that exist at the federal level that our Congress at the beginning of last term was actually able to take advantage of, where the legislature can actually look at executive branch regulations and pass resolutions to roll those back. Because oftentimes what we find as legislators is we get in, we're the ones that hear directly from you, we want to go fix it, and then we find out that some bureaucrat at DEP or some bureaucrat at PennDOT has made a pronouncement that they allegedly have the power to do, and they dare us to stop them. And the problem with us is it actually takes a majority vote of both chambers plus the governor's signature to undo it. Well, the governor's not going to sign something that goes against his own bureaucracy, and so that's the fight we often face. So we've got to take the fight out on the street, and that's why we're here with you. Is I think it's so important that we expose this for what it is and expose the bureaucracy for the lack of accountability that it has to the people that hired them. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gleim.
Hi, thank you. I also wanted to let you know that there's a group of freshmen along with some other business leaders who are representatives within the House who have started a caucus called the Economic Growth Caucus, and I know that Rep. Rowe is on it as well. And our basic function there is to say, you know, we're ranked 44th in the nation right now on economic growth. And our goal is to take that just down 10 points. Like we're starting to just try to chip away at what we can do. And so we're championing legislation that's already put in by other reps into these groups like Matt is talking about that affect that ranking. So getting rid of regulation, high taxes, lack of workforce, all those type of things that are barriers to our economic growth. And I just wanted to let you know also, I attended a summit over the summer. It was a financial summit in York. And the Pew Institute was there, and they said that Pennsylvania's ranked with a D- to failing on what's called budget maneuvers. And they said from a national standpoint, they cannot follow the money. It's really difficult. So when revenue comes in, it just gets absorbed into all these different funds that are outside of our general fund. And so there's a big emphasis right now on trying to pull that back into the general fund, which the legislature then has more control over where those dollars go. So you're spot on with what you're talking about, and we are well aware of it, and we are addressing it the best we can.
And I would just add a couple of things to that: efficiency and transparency, which is really lacking in some of these arenas that you're talking about. Okay. Yes.
A couple things I want Brad Hershey from. It's on now. Brad Hershey from Hoover's here where we're sitting now. Just to follow up what Barb said, I think corporate tax would be the number one thing. You could jump 5-10 places overnight if you would fix that. Some of the other things that and David, you too. I like the idea of this economic growth caucus. Didn't know anything about it. I'm excited to hear about that. One of the things that Matt, you could help me with. I don't want to get real specific here, but I will since I have a chance. Like guys that build sheds, that haul sheds up and down the road, they have an annual permit that they can purchase to haul up to 13 foot wide. That'd be real helpful for me. Every time I got to haul something over 8.5 feet wide, I have to buy a permit. Now, I don't mind going online, getting the permit, telling the state police where I'm going and everything like that, but an annual permit would be real helpful, and I could move equipment the day I wanted to move it rather than waiting till I got a permit. The last thing I had was just investing. You know, I know you guys invest in these tech schools. 5 years ago, our Delaware dealerships, our Lancaster dealership, Virginia, you know, we're seeing this crunch on technicians. And 5 years ago, I didn't feel like I had the problem. The problem's here now in central Pennsylvania, and I need qualified technicians that are skilled and can go to work. So anytime you can invest in these schools, it's needed. That's all I had.
Mr. Hershey, would you mind commenting on your relationship with your technical center, your VOTEC, and your relationship with the schools? Is there a connection? Or are you working with them to try to get those individuals?
Yeah, we have passed. We go to job fairs, you know, whether it's Mifflin County or whether it's at Williamsport at Penn Tech, PA School of Technology. We have alumni from those schools, so we try to we try to tie in that way. What more would you want?
That's great. Commissioner?
Could I just add to that? We are very concerned about that as well. And one thing that we would really like to see, if anything could be done with our education system, is the more co-op programs. We have done a couple of things with co-op. And for instance, we brought a student in and worked in our 911 center, because that is a center that really needs new blood in it, new younger people, because it's very hard to get someone to want to work 24/7 anymore. And so we brought this young folk in from the school system. It worked out beautifully as a co-op, and now he's going to be employed there. So we gained a person in our 911 center, but we need more co-op, whatever has to be done to allow schools, finance, businesses to bring co-ops in from high school.
Great, thank you. Representative Rowe.
So first of all, I just want to sort of build on what my fellow representative in the Economic Growth Caucus mentioned, that not only is Pennsylvania 44th for economic growth, but we're also 47th when it comes to the best states regarding tax burden, so third worst. When you look at any of Pennsylvania's individual tax burdens, it doesn't necessarily look so bad, except for the corporate net income tax, which is third highest in the nation now. But the real damage is quite visible when you add them all up. When you put together the corporate net income tax and the personal income tax and the property tax and the inheritance tax and the gas tax, and you put all of these things together, our tax burden puts us as the third most heavily taxed state in the nation. So when you address that economic growth, we're not going to have economic growth until we start to attack that overwhelming tax burden. When businesses we had this discussion just at our Economic Growth Caucus meeting yesterday, 2 days ago. These days are kind of blurring together. We met with some of the governor's people to say, look, what can we get done here? Like, we realize the governor isn't necessarily going to be friendly to a lot of the policies we support, but what can we get done? You know, the 9.99% corporate net income tax is something that I think we can all agree is way too high, and is going to be a deterrent to a large number of businesses that, when considering where to relocate, are going to check Pennsylvania off the list first because of that. That's just going to push them right out of there. A couple of things that we've been working on. Obviously, the CNI cut is one that we're trying to work through. Some of the pushback we get is that a single CNI point cut is $350 million out of the state budget. And that is a very large number to make up for. But what needs to be understood widely is that will be a very short-term loss lead for a long-term growth. So if we are cutting that corporate net income tax, let's say we cut it 2 points, that's what we're trying to get done for the next year. Sure, that might leave a $700 million hole initially, but the businesses that will then just say, hey, you know what, Pennsylvania's starting to get their act together, they're starting to move in the right direction and choose to relocate here, we're going to broaden the tax base, we're going to see those monies come back to us. But until we start with that, we're not going to see that economic growth come back. And something that I think is also worth addressing is the comments, and I got a couple of these during my campaign, which is very fresh in my mind, that talking so much about the corporate net income tax sounds like a giveaway to corporations and businesses. And what I cannot stress enough, the personal income tax in Pennsylvania is 3.07%. The corporate net income tax is 9.99. Our businesses are already overtaxed, and our businesses are the ones providing those jobs in the first place. So if our businesses aren't allowed to thrive, we won't even have the jobs here at all. I love to use the gas industry as a perfect example, where not only do they, and many of them pay the CNI, but then they also have the impact fees that they have to pay on top of that. And now the governor also wants to impose a severance tax. And he likes to point out that, well, Texas has a severance tax, why shouldn't we? Well, Texas doesn't have an impact fee, and Texas's corporate net income tax is a big fat zero. So trying to compare those two makes no sense. And until we create a more business-friendly environment, we're not going to see Pennsylvania take the place that it could. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very well said. And I am hopeful that Representative Benninghoff is able to join us, because he is leading our caucus on the tax reform package. That is certainly one of the options. There are some other taxes, and that, combined with the regulatory reform that we've already started working on and will continue to work on, should be helpful. Back to the workforce development, though, because even if you had the best of circumstances and all those other things, if you can't get employees to fill your jobs, it's sort of that chicken and egg situation. And so I appreciate your comments. That has been really one of our keys in all of our travels, because we were at Penn College. We did talk to them. We had a package that really helped to grow awareness and allow our schools to know about the awesome jobs that are out there and how you make those connections, the co-ops, apprenticeships, those kinds of situations where our kiddos know what jobs are available, so they do want to stay. And then in addition, maybe you have a lower paying job. How do you get the training to become the next position and the next position? And we've been all over the place where you see people who have come in literally at the bottom of the employment rung and are now the plant manager. And those are kind of success stories that I think are really important that we continue to share. We've also talked to entrepreneurs because we have a wonderful program with the Ben Franklins and the Industrial Resource Centers, and they're not necessarily well known either. So that's part of our, in learning from you, we're also able to help showcase some of our winning. Did you have a comment, Representative Gleim?
I just wanted to make a comment to the commissioner on the co-ops. Just so you know, I come from a construction family. We have co-ops as well. We're an excavation company at Gleim Excavating, so I totally know about the co-ops. But I really want to encourage businesses all throughout the state to help with the culture. So there's a culture that going to Votex and isn't as, great as going to college. And I really think the businesses can really make an impact with the high schools if they have the time to come in and say, we really value these students. They have a place in our, in our county, and really highlight some of the great things that the kids are doing at their local Votex. I'm just chipping away at it, but I have a bill that's up next week, I think, or no, 2 weeks from now, where I'm legislating that the high schools put the certifications on the transcripts. Because, they spend 3 years taking NIMS after NIMS or NOCTI after NOCTI, and they get these certifications, and nobody knows. And so they're getting the IB and they're getting the AP on the transcript, but they're not getting that C for certification. And then when they do, maybe the businesses can come in and say, great job. And I don't know, there's a cultural issue too, so.
And let me just say that the more we talk to kids, the more we talk to people, those blue-collar workers, they're making more money than those college
with less
students.
Debt.
They're
with
finding
less
more
debt.
jobs. So that's such a worthwhile thing, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. Yes, Ron.
I think we're definitely seeing a shift in that direction. We have a very strong business and education committee with the chamber, and we've definitely seen a stronger shift to getting rid of that stigma of going into the trades. But just yesterday, we actually had college and career fairs in both counties this week. And it's funny, just yesterday I had a vendor come up to me from a trade school and saying, we're still seeing it. We're asking these kids, so what would you like to do with your future? And they're saying, oh, we're going to college. And as we ask them, what are you going for? I don't know. They still do not have direct path. They're still not being directed that this is an option, that you can go in and make a good living. And I know our industries are also working really hard to try to erase that stigma too and show them what industry looks like now. It doesn't look like what it used to. It's you can eat off the floors. It's clean, it's high tech, but we're still not doing a great job in erasing that stigma. We still need to work harder at that because, as I said, as of yesterday, we're still seeing it still happening. Some of the things that I definitely workforce development. I'm hearing that I've been involved with several panel discussions with employers. They're still struggling to find employable individuals, and when they can't, the ones that are paying the most are taking from the other employers. That's what's happening. They're just kind of like taking each other's employees. So we definitely need that skilled workforce, or just employable workforce is what I'm hearing over and over. And I know another concern that I have heard from individuals is that looming possibility of legalization of recreational marijuana. If our employers are already struggling to fill their workforce, how is that going to impact? Is that even going to have more of a negative impact as they're trying to employ? So those are some of the things I'm seeing. And another thing, on a positive note, that we're seeing in our two-county area is an upswing in young entrepreneurs. We actually felt the need to start an entrepreneurial meetup program that we have that meets bi-monthly. And we have an average of 30 to 35 that come consistently, that are new, young entrepreneurs that are excited, they're ready to move forward, but they are finding some issues. And we have more mature entrepreneurs like Mike who come to mentor them. You'll see him at the end still there talking to some of these young people, trying to help them navigate what he has already had to do. So that's exciting to me, that I see these young entrepreneurs that are stepping out, that do want to stay here, plant roots, and raise their families here. So we're really excited. We partnered with our IDC on that, and it's something really exciting to see that happening. But those are just some things, and kind of building on our Business and Education Committee. We are doing a lot of things to help develop that future workforce. We're doing educator in the workplace programs. We're doing student in the workplace programs, so that they can actually go into places of business and find out what degrees are necessary, or is there a degree necessary, for the educators to know how to push students in certain directions, so they're educated in those things as well. So it's something that we're really proud of, that we do have that strong, we saw that gap between the business community and the education community, and built that bridge.
I just wanted to say, to Rhonda's point real quick, to our local employers here, they had the last business and education meeting that I was able to attend at the Mifflin County Academy. And they do a really excellent job of getting local employers to quite literally sponsor some of their programs, so that then they can get them into the workforce and even hire them right out of high school in some cases. So it's pretty exciting that that's happening around here. And I do think some of the conversation in this area is starting to shift, and it's been encouraging to see.
I appreciate your comments as well. I'm really excited about the entrepreneurial growth. And we were in Lehigh with Ben Franklin, and we spoke to entrepreneurs and the relationship that they have and the growth that they receive and the mentorship. We were also in Penn State at the Launchbox, which is, a great program that really partners entrepreneurs with not only the college, but the community, opportunities for funding. That's terrific. And I'm really thankful that you brought up recreational marijuana, because even prior to the listening tour and the governor and the lieutenant governor's push for recreational legalization, we were hearing the same concerns over medical marijuana in the workforce. And what we've heard as a caucus from our employers is that it's already a challenge. So you have a card for medical marijuana, or you're taking a painkiller, or you're on some other medication, they still have the right as an employer to say, not on my job, not on, whatever that might be. And so the attitudinal change with recreational marijuana is concerning, because if the governor and the lieutenant governor say it's no big deal, our young people and others believe it's no big deal. They can just do that and it's not a problem. And so we're certainly pushing that message that it isn't appropriate on a workforce, whether it's medical or not? And how do you continue to push that back? I will tell you that from the Republican caucus's leadership, and I'll speak only for our leadership, we find it very troubling, and the bill will not see the light of day as long as it's our leadership in the majority. Thank you. I know that Mr. Hazard had a comment.
Sure. Again, I'm George Hazard with the Juniata Valley Winery. I represent a little bit different style of business that we've discussed so far, and that's agribusiness or agritourism. I also have about a 20-head beef farm here in Juniata County, so I will speak on behalf of the agricultural community. I worked in that community for about 20 years throughout Pennsylvania and a lot of the rest of the country. A little bit about our business. We see about 25,000 visitors to our winery a year. So that's quite a bit of tourism into a relatively small community. Tourism economically has dropped tremendously in Pennsylvania, and I think throughout the country. But as part of that tourism, I also represent 16 other wineries. I chair a wine trail, the Susquehanna Heartland Wine Trail, 16 businesses there, and also I chair a committee of 10 agritourism businesses with the Juniata River Valley. So I'll speak on behalf of those 26 other businesses as well. I had a bunch of items that I had prepared to talk about, and many of those items have been talked about already today. And I'll talk about our young entrepreneurs first, because I'm hearing a good bit about that right now. Unless you fix some of these other problems, they're not going to be in business very long here in Pennsylvania. I want my 4 sons to come back, work in Juniata County, or close, because I love them, and I want them to be successful. But until you fix the economic burdens, they are not going to start their own businesses. They're going to leave. That's what's going to happen. It's just common sense. You know, I heard Bruce talk about infrastructure. I've heard other people talk about regulatory demands. They're crazy. I just built a commercial building last year. The regulatory demands of this state were harder than building the building itself. And there was a lot of contractors involved. It's very difficult and expensive. The tax burden in Pennsylvania, we've heard the numbers. What is not added to that tax burden is the new pay-to-play cost in this state. The additional surcharges that have been put onto my licenses since the current administration has come into office. These are just extra fees that are added to my existing licenses. Why? We cannot get an answer. But when it's almost 100% of the current licenses that I have to pay for every year, it's a lot of money. So these are not taxes. This is a new pay-to-play mentality which costs businesses a lot of money. And you can find it all over the place. Of the businesses that I represent, they're small businesses, they're landowners. We have a lot of investment in our lands, and property tax reform is at the top of my list. Juniata County is an agricultural business. The majority of those landowners are older. They have a very limited income. Agriculture has been under a lot of restrictions lately as far as economic growth. Property tax reform is needed. The tax burden here is significant. I cannot make money on a 20-head beef herd. I can't even pay for my property taxes on that income. Never mind make any money for my family. The one topic I wanted to talk about related to the winery industry is that we are limited in growth opportunities due to regulatory demands. We are allowed to go outside of our home base and do shows throughout the state, and we are limited to 100 permits a year. The demand for that is significantly more. And I know a lot of my friends and counterparts are limiting their economic growth going into the fourth quarter of the year because we're out of permits. We can't do anymore. We're getting calls to go do it. We can't do it. We have no more licenses allowed. I currently have 5 stores, so I'm spread out throughout the state, and that's what a business needs to do. You know, it needs to be able to grow. I can only have 5 stores in the state of Pennsylvania. I've hit a ceiling. I'm a relatively new company. I've already hit my ceiling. That number needs to go up. It doesn't need to be unlimited, but it needs to go up, and I'm seeing that by the other industries, the other businesses that I represent. So there's been some flexibility from the current legislation for alcohol, particularly wine. But what I've seen is a huge influx of wine from California and Australia and everywhere else around the world, and not from Pennsylvania. If you go down to Sheetz, if you go to Rutter's, if you go to the grocery stores, the majority of them, you will find 0 Pennsylvania wines. So that has not allowed us to grow economically. So from what we've seen of that legislation, it's very limited to our current businesses. It's good for Pennsylvania, but it's not good for us. So these other limits that allow us to grow need to be looked at and changed. So that's everything I had. Thank you.
By the way, the fees are just attached by another name.
That's right, Bruce. And you touched on it earlier. They just give them a different name. They don't call them a tax anymore. It's called a fee. And a lot of these fees just come under different certifications that my employees now need to have. You know, they're only $30 a piece, but when it all adds up, at the end of the day, I'm looking at reducing my employee base. That's what the conversations have been at home the last month, reducing our employee base. That's not very good.
Commissioner Gray.
One more thing that I'd like to bring up, I'd be remiss if I didn't, is broadband. We hear a lot of words about rural broadband, all the assistance out there to correct the problem that we have. We know, and I'm sure your counties have some black areas.
Alice, that's a huge problem where I'm from.
It is. So if we want to grow in industry, we must have broadband everywhere. We must have good, high definition broadband. And you know, service providers, I understand there has to be a profit. There has to be. But service providers are the key to this. Governments can't force, in my opinion, without legislation, service providers to provide that service. We are rural. We have homes that are very rural. We have businesses that are very rural. They're black. We have kids that take iPads home from school. They can't use them because they live in a black area.
Alice, I'll add to that.
Okay.
And I work very closely with a large service provider in this community, and I talked to some of their corporate representatives. I spent a lot of time with them. Their exact words was, why would we invest in your area?
Okay.
Why would we invest our money there?
We hear that too. But if we had the correct services, we would have more of an opportunity. We are working with CEDACOG, but we need to bring more service providers to the table, the big ones that can make a difference. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hershey.
Yeah, we have 9 dealerships, and most of them are covered with broadband, and that steers our tractors. These tractors have auto guidance in them. The combines have all the yield monitors. We're planting corn down to 1 square inch at most of our areas. We could greatly grow our precision agriculture is what we're calling it. We could greatly grow that here in central PA if we had better coverage. So we're limited here in this location because of just not having coverage.
I feel like I really need to comment on that because I represent Clarion, part of Armstrong and part of Forest, a very rural community as well. I will tell you that regardless of where we've been in the state, with few exception, rural broadband is absolutely a key. My understanding and some of what we have learned that the best option for our rural areas is the private-public partnership. So I'm happy to hear that you're working with CEDACOG. I know in my district, it's the local development district that's really taken the lead on that, because it starts to get who we need it, we know we need it, but who's taking the lead? And so having that opportunity to take the lead is really great. Yes, please. Yeah, come over here and we'll grab a mic for you. Can we fit him here? Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Very good. I feel like one of those cheap nightclub singers, but here we go. So I'm preaching to the choir here, I know that, but we're pretty excited with our involvement in going into an area where we really haven't been into before. We've heard people talk. We've seen the whole issue of how this is stymieing economic growth. And with, I guess, this pilot program that we're initiating with the support of Representative Hershey and others, we're pretty excited at what we're hearing out there. And part of what's been occurring is that dialogue's happening with these ISPs. And although, to Alice's point, I don't know if this is an unfortunate or a fortunate standpoint, the big boys aren't at the table. It's the little guys who have this little market niche, and they're very interested in working with us. And I think we're on the right track here in that it is a public-private partnership, in that we're looking at ways to trying to incentivize these guys. So instead of them going out there and borrowing money from a bank from commercial rates, we're looking at developing a low-interest loan fund. We're also having very serious conversations with the counties as it relates to their vertical assets and their towers, so that we can match those towers up with these ISPs for an affordable rate, so that there is a way for them to come in instead of looking at building this stuff out for scratch. We can look at ways of doing it in an incentive type of way. So we're at the point where we're ready to launch this. I would say within this calendar year, I hope that we have a meeting that we're trying to put together with the commissioners so we can iron out some final details, like what do you want to charge for your towers? Because maybe they want to give that space away, maybe they want to do it for a nominal fee, but I don't think it might not be at market rate, because that would disincentivize these guys, because as it's already been mentioned, there isn't enough population to make it economically feasible, so we had to find ways to try to do that. So we're hoping that this is successful. I have pretty high expectations that it will be, and that we can model this to do it, duplicate it across the state. And that's part of the rationale of looking at this. So we're talking to our other fellow local development districts, and we're comparing notes. And we hope that next year at this time we can point to some real success and see some other initiatives that are being duplicated, similar to what might happen here in Juniata, Mifflin, and Perry counties. So that's our little commercial here for broadband.
That's excellent.
And we appreciate your thought about the towers. The other issue that can come up with the towers, our towers sit in forestry land, state forestry land, and other entities. So all these factions must be made to work together.
Absolutely. I would just add the comment that the state has been also inventorying its opportunities to partner with our locals, and so don't hesitate to reach out to them or your state rep to help you get that done.
Right, I can make a comment here real quick, because I just wanted to echo when Mr. Hazard says that he's in a dead part of the county. I live about a half mile from him, and it is a dead part of the county. And I believe Commissioner Gray does as well. But and I want to make sure that my colleagues hear about the concerns related to the wineries as well. He said he represents a number of them. I think that I personally have 5 or 6 of them in my district, and then I have a brewery and a distillery as well. So those are really holding back some of the agritourism opportunities that we have in our community in the state. And I think Representative Gleim has a comment related to that.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know also, when we had workforce development panel in my district, we had 2 wineries show up and had the exact same speech. So we are hearing this across the state. Number one. Number two, I am the rep that has the agritourism bill currently in the House. And we've been working very diligently with the Farm Bureau and the Grange and all of these farm entities to try to get that over the finish line. The obstacle on that bill are the trial attorneys who don't want to limit the liability. But we are looking at it very similar to how the horse people have the sign that says, when you enter, you're entering at your own risk. They already have a precedent in place, and we're just trying to extend that to all of our farming tourism groups. So I'm just letting you know it's there. There's a bill for it, and we're working really hard to get it over the finish line.
Mr. Hazard, sorry about that. Would you expand on the 100 permits? Is that for your county?
No, it's a state requirement from the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board that allows us to go to 100. Actually, it covers a 24-hour period, so I get.
So the special occasion permits.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. Special occasion permits. So if I would go to Harrisburg to a show to sell our product for that day, that would include 1 permit. And if I have 3 events on the same day, it's 3 separate permits. So very quickly, over the course of expanding throughout Pennsylvania, I might burn 5 permits in one day. 20 weeks of that and I'm out of permits. So, and usually we try to manage that, but at the end of the year, when you're counting your permits, it's a very important part of the year. It's the holiday season. It's the fourth quarter. It's when you make your money, and you're out of permits. So, and the state gets $30 a permit. So it's actually a economic input to the state. So we have to buy those permits. So there is an economic opportunity for the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board by expanding that number.
Thank you. I appreciate your expanding on that. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Buffington.
Again, I'm going to expand on Mr. Hazard here with building code and inspection. That's another area that has really just gone out of control. Any business trying to expand or open, that's another burden on them trying to get going. And it's not only the money, it's the time that goes into it, the process, and the inspectors that are running this. I'm going to say they seem to be more on a power trip. It's not about protecting the people. It's money and power. And they're going in and stopping the businesses from growing. And the other thing it does is it creates another layer of expense. I can't even open up a retail store without spending $10,000 just for engineering, because that's what's needed to go through the engineering process to get the construction permit just to even start building or a remodel. And there again, consumers pay for it. And it goes back to housing. Affordable housing. You can't build affordable housing because of the building inspection process. So that's an area actually that was on my list. It's incredible anymore, and that's where it goes back to I don't even know how a business would get started sometimes. In every township you go into handles it a little differently, even though they're following the same book.
I'd just like to make a couple of quick comments. None of this is earth-shattering. You all know this. Bruce alluded to earlier that he put in a $250,000 paving job at the airport for $450,000. Prevailing wage is a serious issue, too. I mean, especially in a small community like ours where we don't necessarily have the amount of local dollars to throw into projects, and then we go to the state and or feds for money, and then we're forced to pay prevailing wage, and a job like Bruce said that you could do for $250,000, you're now spending $450,000. That really isn't doing us any favors. That's just padding the pockets of probably unions would be my guess. And I'd also like to throw out there a comment, and you can agree or disagree, but it's basically that no business ever really pays a tax. It's all a consumer tax, because ultimately every business has to pass it on to their consumers, because if they don't, then they eat it themselves, and then they're no longer profitable, and then they're no longer a business. So realistically, every tax is a consumer tax. So every time the state comes up with a new way to add something onto, you know, as another tax somewhere, ultimately the price of pellets go up. You know, or price of bottled wine goes up, and the consumers ultimately pay for it. And if we could nip some of these in the bud and get rid of some of them, it would go a long way towards making a business profitable. They don't have to pass as much on to the consumer. They can hire more employees. They can expand their business. All these things help promote growth. So that's basically it.
Thank you. Representative Rowe.
Just to build on that, so I have the Central Susquehanna Valley Transportation Project in part of my district, the large bypass of Route 15 going from Selinsgrove all the way up through almost to the Milton area. And looking at the cost projections of that when the project was first considered back in the 60s, I think it was, to now, and seeing that massive ballooning, I did some research into what some of those cost factors were. And found some interesting things, looked at subway construction, because that has a lot of complicated moving parts to it, and found that in Europe, where we often consider, you know, in America, we can consider ourselves to be much more free, we actually find that the regulatory and environmental and union burdens make it just the opposite. In Northern Europe, for example, building a subway, a mile costs between $250 and $400 million. If you go to Canada, it usually costs, on average, these numbers are average, is $150 million a mile. But in New York City, it costs them $3.5 billion per mile. And when you look at the permits that are limiting that sort of growth, you look at the cost associated with those permits, you look at the costs associated with issues like prevailing wage, union contracts, all these other issues. That is why, you know, America can't fix a pothole, because all these things that are costing 10 times what they should be costing, and that is definitely limiting that sort of infrastructure investment or business growth.
Thank you. We are coming up upon our time to end, so I don't want to limit the conversation. If you have any closing comments, I'm happy to hear them. Yes, Commissioner.
It's not that you folks did any of this, but we would love to know when we're going to be reimbursed for our voting machines, if that's moving anywhere.
Well, I'm happy to discuss that. So you are aware that the budget included $90 million. And I will, I'll go out on a limb. I think that we were 100%.
And with this crowd.
Yes, we all voted yes on making sure that you had the $90 million. And of course, the governor vetoed that. We are now working through the process of those voter bills that would include the $90 million again. And so I am hopeful. It sounds like we have an agreement, and the bills started moving this week. So I am hopeful that it will be sooner rather than later. I won't pretend that it isn't going to be a battle, because we're going to have to carry that legislation ourselves. And that's okay. We can do it. No, we did not. We were very generous with taxpayer dollars.
And if I can just add, so I unfortunately was not around to vote on that yet, since I wasn't. But
She's whipping you, yeah.
Suffice it to say, when that does come up again, I certainly will support it. Somebody had mentioned property tax reform earlier, and it's definitely something we need to work on. But in the meantime, we need to definitely look at these unfunded mandates that the state is passing down, because when the cost is passed along to the counties or the municipalities or the school districts, whatever the mandate may be, that's just driving those local costs up. So we can't talk about property tax reform while also slapping local governments with these unfunded mandates.
That's an excellent point, and one that, although we didn't veto the bill, we also didn't create the mandate to change your voting machines in the time frame that was provided. Thank you. I want to make sure that it was clear to everyone. And I actually was a commissioner during HAVA when we had to go to the new system of machines. And I think that it's been so long now, people don't realize what had occurred and why those changes had occurred. So I appreciate your hard work in making that happen. You know, elections aren't easy. The back office has a lot of work to do to make that happen. Thank you. All right, anyone else? Very good. Well, I really appreciate the interaction. It's been a great roundtable. We're thrilled to have all of you here. And do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know, especially the local folks, that if you have concerns in the future, I hope I've been accessible to you guys. My office is right across the street. My numbers are all publicly available. So if anything comes out of this conversation that you feel you didn't get to address today, feel free to call me anytime.
Excellent. Again, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful fall day.